This is the Hasselblad 907X and the CFV 100C, a 100 megapixel medium format camera in the basically smallest form factor that you can get outside of maybe the new Fujifilm 100 RF. So after a year plus of use, thousands and thousands of images, and taking this camera all over the world, what do I actually think about it? And would I legitimately recommend it to other people? Let's talk about it. Now, I've had a bit of an ongoing relationship with Hasselblad for years now, honestly, but since the release of this camera, I was part of the launch, so I got to post a video of this on launch day. I had it for a couple months before it launched, and because of that, I was able to receive this camera as part of that campaign. So I will definitely let you know I did not pay for this with my own money, but I did make a series of videos for them in exchange for it, and gave my feedback and all sorts of stuff. So this video can't legitimately be completely unbiased because of that, but I am definitely making this particular video of my own accord, and it's just one of those cameras and things that I've made videos about the series of the 907X and have just always loved the Hasselblad brand and aesthetic, and my 500CM is one of my favorite cameras of all time. So it's one of those things that I know there's a lot of questions about, and every time I post anything about this camera, I get a lot of questions and comments about it. So I wanted to give as much of my, not necessarily unbiased, but my actual thoughts on this thing, and whether or not you can trust that is going to be up to you, because again, like, if this was in exchange for videos and things, but again, this one is of my own accord. Hasselblad has no idea I'm making this or anything like that. So again, take that information how you will, but know that going into this video. So right off the bat, this camera is not cheap. It's going to eliminate the vast majority of people from actually being able to pick up one and use it. Before this came out, I was considering purchasing the older version, the 50 megapixel version. And I do think that this newer 100 megapixel version does have enough differences to differentiate it and also make it worth at least picking this up or thinking about picking this up on the used market, depending on what your expectations are out of this. And while I brought that up, let's just talk about some of the differences. Obviously, you're getting a 100 megapixel sensor instead of a 50 megapixel sensor, and that also comes with the added technology. So personally, do I care necessarily about having a 100 megapixel sensor instead of 50? 50 is still plenty, and for the way that I use this camera, for the most part, is still enough. But that being said, that the processing power and things like that make this camera a lot more usable. And especially if you are going to be doing a lot of things like I do, like adapting other lenses to this, you're definitely getting a significantly faster image readout on this sensor versus the 50 megapixel sensor. If you are purchasing this and you want to adapt lenses to it, I will say that this is probably worth spending a little bit extra money to get, and you can probably resell it for that same differential eventually if you aren't going to be interested in it. So I would definitely say that the newer version with its, all the different things like the 1 terabyte SSD that's built in, the USB-C charging, things like that are probably just worth the upgrade in general, regardless if you are going to be adapting lenses. But I think that that is the thing that really kind of pushes it over the line between the older version and this version. Now, I'll preface that as well with the fact that I didn't use the 50 megapixel version with the new V series lenses. So these are definitely a lot snappier, a lot faster, and I really just like the lenses. So I don't have that in the bag in terms of knowing how well these perform on the older sensors. But if you are only going to be using native glass and you're only going to be using maybe some of the upgraded lenses, maybe that is somewhere where this makes sense. But in general, I think that the updated version of this camera is fantastic in a lot of ways. Now, I think the biggest thing, other than just the aesthetics, I guess we'll just talk about the aesthetics. So this thing obviously looks amazing. I probably get more looks when I'm using this than even when I'm carrying around and using a Leica camera. A lot of people know what a Leica is, but a lot of people, when they see this, are just like, what is that thing? I've probably never got more just like interest in a camera than when I'm carrying this thing around. And the fact that this thing is so small in that way and still packs a full 100 megapixel sensor is absolutely bonkers to me. And I think one of the things that I love the most about it in its general use is the fact that this fits vertically like this into just like a regular lens pouch. So actually I'm going to grab a lens and we'll see kind of like how this compares. So in terms of like carry and other things that you could be doing with this, this is the Godox V100S. Like it's the speed light that I use for weddings. And you can see it's significantly taller, but it still fits in like a lens pouch in a bag with no real issues. This is the Sony 135 f1.8 GM lens. And you can see that in terms of like its general width and stuff, the Hasselblad here is boxier. So like it's going to stick out on the corners a little bit more. But most lens things in like a bag or something are a rectangle anyway. So that's not really going to matter. And it's actually slightly shorter, even with the lens cap off, than the 135. So if you can fit this, you're going to be able to fit this no problem. This is a smaller lens. It's the 51.4 GM from Sony. And obviously you can see that it's a little bit smaller. But if you stick the lens hood on this lens, it goes out a little bit and then up, and it's actually bigger than this whole camera system here. And I will say that this is also with the 38 2.5V. And if you put the lens hood on this, obviously it's going to get a little bit bigger, but it still fits in there with the lens hood as well. It makes it so easy to just bring this anywhere. Speaking of its small form factor and size, I think one of my favorite things in using this camera is the fact that I can just hold it like this and walk around and use it. I found that the face tracking, I just stick it on auto and it just like does the face tracking thing pretty well. I can hold down the autofocus, do kind of like a half press on the shutter if I want to focus, recompose on something other than a face. And then the face tracking just does its job pretty well. And the fact that I was able to go around Europe, use a 100 megapixel sensor with incredible Hasselblad optics one-handed while I was like holding my son's hand or something like that, like it's just bonkers, the fact that I'm able to do that. I love using the manual focus thing here a bit. Probably didn't use it as much as I thought I was going to, but still love the ability to do that and kind of dial things in if we really need to. The little control ring here is great. It's got some like little clicks in here. I do wish it had hard stops. I wish it was a little bit different, but it does have the ability to, use this. And you're able to switch it between, your shutter speed and things as well. I really wish, really wish that I could simply make this all-time shutter speed and this to be all-time aperture. But by default, this is aperture, and then you can make this either aperture or shutter speed. The way to go about changing that currently, and if they've somehow updated this, let me know, is you have to hold down this button as kind of like a function button, and then you can switch it to be shutter speed. So it's one of those things where if I'm holding this one-handed and I want to just change the shutter speed, I can't do it. I have to go in, switch it over, put my thumb on here, and then dial in the shutter speed, let go. So the way that I've used it, and it's like just slightly backwards from how my brain works, but whatever, is I've usually assigned the custom wheel here to be the shutter speed, and then the little wheel here is the aperture. So just slightly annoying. It's slightly different than I would normally want to set this camera up. And since before this camera was released even, I've asked Hasselblad to maybe change that. It seems like it would be something that would be really easy to change. Even maybe just making this button a tap to switch between it or something. I don't know. But I would love to make this be a dedicated shutter speed dial and make this a dedicated aperture wheel. Oh well. Now, I've mentioned the other things that are great about this, but we'll just hit them again anyway. Battery life I found was really good. I didn't really have any issues with it. I would go out all day and use this for long days at a time with my family walking around Europe and never ended up running out of battery. The fact that it also has a built-in 1 TB SSD in here is also just bonkers, and something that just makes the camera, it's one of those things where like you don't need it. I could just have 2 card slots in here, but the fact that it has a built-in SSD, and to be honest, I use this thing kind of like a film camera, so I don't just blast through images on it. Yeah, I still have like thousands of images that I could still put through onto this SSD. And again, I've used it quite a bit. I've shot thousands of images with it, but there are still, even with the ginormous file sizes that this thing puts out, still have room on this thing. And it's nice to just have like internally a complete archive of everything that I've used on this camera, because 1 TB, even with a 100 megapixel camera, is still a lot. And I know that every other camera has this nowadays as well, but just the fact that you can use this little USB-C port, and I love the implementation on here. I will say that there are a few cables that are a little bit too thick to work in here. It just doesn't fit inside that. But I love that it's not behind like a weird flap or anything. There is a little flap in there, but it's just like you press it in and it goes. So it's just a really cool implementation and makes this really, really easy to use. Now, no camera is perfect, and there are a few things that I would love to see in like a newer version, or again, like an update to this. Obviously, I've already talked about the just button adjustments and how I would love to reassign those a little bit. And it would be nice if they made some sort of like sunshade kind of thing here, similar to how like my 500CM, like the waist level finder, has just like a little sunshade around it. Personally, like I walked through most of Europe almost on a daily basis with this in broad daylight, hard sun, sun bouncing off of buildings and everything like that, and never really had an issue with checking out the viewfinder here. So I will say that it's not an issue, but I can see some people maybe having an issue with it. Would be nice. I will also say that at times in really darker scenarios, I can have this camera or the X2D has hunted a little bit on my 90mm. But generally for what this is, and I definitely have a different level of expectations out of medium format cameras than I do out of 35mm cameras. The only difference being the GFX system. They hyped that up quite a bit about the autofocus being good. So that's why specifically on my video on the 55 1.7, I was a little bit critical of that because the focusing just isn't great on that. I will say that if this did come with an internal shutter though, I would be much, much, much more likely to use this more with manual focus glass. It's one of the things that is a little bit of a downside because I can't do a lot of movement and motion. I would use this quite a bit more with faster adapted lenses while maybe I'm moving with a client, maybe they're like walking. I'm basically only using those adapted things for portraits and still life and things like that. And to be honest, I found the lenses to be so good that I have really, really rarely used the Midicon 65 1.4. That was like my staple lens. It was the main lens that I really used for 90% of the time on my GFX. And while I do have it and use it on here, the weight is so different, and the slower sensor readout here does make it a little bit more problematic. So the ability to use like the 55V, the 38V, the 90V, I've just used this quite a bit more than I really thought I was going to be adapting and using other things. So overall, like, do I recommend this camera necessarily to other people out there? It's kind of like a yes and no, right? Like, this camera is a necessity to almost no one. Like, no one really needs this camera, but I get why like most people want one, right? I think this is a camera that is really amazing. It's something that is inspiring. It's something that I would just put out on the coffee table and look at. Like, it's a beautiful piece of just camera technology. It's the same way that I look at some of my guitars and I want to pick them up and play them. This definitely falls into that. It's inspiring to look at. It's inspiring to use. All those kind of things. Is it the right tool for every job? Not necessarily. There's been plenty of times where Even like the X2D has been a better camera for some situations. Having an EVF is really nice sometimes. And even the fact that the vast majority of technology from the X2D is in here, still on some commercial shoots, I'm choosing the X2D over this. But for going out and taking images and having a good time and having like incredible image quality, being able to take landscape images and crop in and use only one lens sometimes in such a small form factor, I think that's where, while I can't say that I recommend this as like a necessity, obviously, to anybody, if you have the means to pick up this camera, if you are someone that just wants a camera that is really enjoyable to use, and if you have your expectations at a point where you're not expecting lightning fast autofocus, you're not expecting crazy tracking, and you are going to be someone that's going to be a little bit more deliberate about the image making process, absolutely. Now, one of the things that I will be honest, I have definitely not used nearly as much as I might think I was going to when I first got this was the ability to use this on the 500 series. I think once I expanded my lens lineup a little bit more and had some more lenses, so now I have the 38, the 55, and the 90. Having the 80 wasn't as much of like a necessity because that's the only lens I have on my 500 series. And putting this on that camera and doing that whole roundup, it's a fun endeavor and it's fun to take that out and use it. But is it something that is, again, like a necessity? And have I used it as much as I thought I would? Probably not. The convenience factor of having these smaller lenses on this smaller body are just really nice. The experience of using that on the film back is really, really fun, or on the film camera, and using this on kind of to move back and forth between like a digital and a film back is really fun. But it is one of those things where like I would much rather use this as like a dedicated thing and bring the whole camera out as a digital camera and not be bouncing back and forth between film and digital, mostly because the difference there is fairly significant in terms of the field of view, because you're working with essentially like a 56 by 56 millimeter negative versus a 44 by 33 millimeter digital sensor. So your crop factor is much different. And you're just working with like different focal lengths at that point and different fields of view, really, even though the focal length is technically the same, right? But the image that you're getting versus on film is just much different. So swapping them back and forth isn't exactly necessarily the same. But if you do want to have that full, like it's the most outside of a Leica, I think that the putting this on a 500 series camera and carrying around a Leica digital camera is about as close to a film-like experience that you can get in the modern day. Maybe shooting like a DSLR as well is kind of like reckons and harkens back to that film experience. But did I use it as much as I thought I was going to? No. But is it a fun thing to do as an exercise and things? Absolutely. So your mileage may vary on that particular feature, but I just want to give my honest opinion on how much I actually used it as that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is this a camera you are considering picking up or interested in? I know that Hasselblad's doing a good job of continuing to get these out to more people and keeping videos coming. So to be honest, I think it's really fun to see the videos and other people's perspectives continue to pop up. And then if you have any more questions about this or the X2D and this whole series, let me know in the comments down below. You can check out my original video on the 907X up here. Check out my video comparing it to the X2D up here, and I will see you in one of those videos.